Hi, this is Steve. Welcome back to Scale Model Kit Review. In this video, I continue to build the Eagle Moss Willys MB Jeep, and that's the World War II Jeep. I am on pack number 7. Now, in pack number 7 includes stages 23 through 26. Now, I apologize, this is a long video, it's about a half hour long. Stage 26 will really handle the brake lines and show you all the different connectors and how all that routes through on the chassis. So I get into a lot of detail with that. Also, take note too, we talk about assembling the rear axle housing, the upper and lower housing, and if you'll notice there's a couple screws that hold on the lower housing. That's kind of a weak point for that axle. So what I would suggest, and it happened with me, is I would suggest you go ahead and super glue that lower housing to the axle and put a bunch of CA glue in there, or you could use 5-minute epoxy to strengthen that whole assembly up, because where those screws go in, those 2 screws on each side of that lower housing, makes it a weak point on that axle, and there's a lot of weight back there. So I went ahead and did that, but I did that off camera. I didn't actually show it to you on film here. So anyway, do that and you should be okay on that rear axle. But moving on, if you haven't done so already, head over to Eagle Moss and subscribe to this Jeep today. Let them know I sent you, SMKR. Let's get started. Welcome back. Let's look at the build instructions for Pack 7, the first stage, Stage 23. So for Stage 23, we continue with the rear suspension, and this time we're going to install the U-bolts on the rear axles. So let me get the parts out, and I'll be right back. Here's the parts pack for Stage 23. I'll go ahead and take these out and we will get a closer look. Be right back. And here's a close-up of those parts. We got 4 U-bolts and the backing rear plates for the rear axles. And you can see both front and back details here. Everything's plastic. So we take our U-bolt and we're going to slide it in from underneath. And it's going to go through these 2 holes here. Probably the best way to do it is put the U-bolt around the axle and then try to slide it through the 2 holes, just like that. What I like to do is super glue those. Should be enough. And that's what that looks right there. I'll do the other 3 and I'll be right back. And here are the U-bolts installed on the axle on both sides. Next we put our backing plate on. And that's what this looks like. So we want to have the details facing the inboard side, because that could be seen from underneath. And then we want to have the brake line on top. So just like that. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. go. So that's all we do for stage 23. Let's look at stage 24. Welcome back. Let's look at stage 24 build instructions. So for stage 24, we get the upper and lower differential halves along with the differential cover, and we get some oil caps and the rear transmission shaft. So it looks like the first thing we do is we install the upper and lower differential halves. We install the drive shaft along with that, and then we install the differential oil plugs, and that's going to go both on the front and rear differentials. Let me get the parts and I'll be right back. So remember, this comes out of pack 7. This is stage 24 parts, and I'll go ahead and take these out and we'll get a closer look. Here's a close-up of those parts. The metal parts happen to be the top and bottom of the differential halves, and that's these right here. And also the drive shaft from the transmission. The rear cover is plastic, and then we receive the caps for the rear cover, and the caps, the smaller caps that look like that, they go on the rear covers, both front and back. Looks like they give us a spare. Very nice. And then the bottom of the differential are the larger caps, and they look like that, and they go on the front and back differential. So we'll be taking care of that real shortly. And these FM screws. So the first step is we take our differential cover, and this would be the bottom half, and that's what that looks like there. It has a drain plug on it. We're going to insert that from underneath. And 2 FM screws go into that. I pre-lubricated the holes for the screws, so they'll go in easier and less apt to break them off. Screw these down until they're tight. Nice and tight there. Next thing we do is before I put the differential cover on, because it has to be mounted and inserted in between so it stays in place here, I'm going to go ahead and put the cap on it first. It's just going to make it easier. So these would be the smaller caps that look like that, and they're simply just going to go down just like that. Now if you want, you can leave them on the tree just like I did, and then you can cut them off after. And that's how that looks there. Bring over the frame, and this will just insert down on top of that hole, just like that. And we'll take our drive shaft, this drive shaft here, that will go, the shorter end here will go into the transfer case like that, and then the other side goes into the differential. Put my top cover on. Just like that. squeeze everything together here. Snap right in there. Two more FM screws go into this. And the last one here. Screw it down till it's tight. And there's how that looks. Looks great. I'll turn it over. And we need to put our plug on the back one and the front one. So this time it's the larger plug. So I'm just going to insert it in there while it's still on the tree. I'll cut it off. And that's how that looks there. Bring over the back one. Insert that one. And then cut it off. And there you go. So that completes stage 24. Let's look at stage 25. Welcome back. Let's look at stage 25. So for stage 25, we receive another wheel and tire assembly. And these are all the parts associated with that. So we did this once before already. It's a very easy build in this case. And then we'll actually install both tires to the rear axle. Let me get the parts and I'll be right back. Here's the parts for stage 25. I believe this is pack 7, but you can see here all the parts that are included for the wheel and tire assembly. Here's a close-up of those parts, and as far as the rim goes for the Jeep here, it's made out of metal, and that's very nice there, very well detailed. Actually has the valve stem inside there, and then the back side of the rim. Then we have the drum cover, and that's made of plastic. Then we have the hub cover, hub cap as they call it, and that's also made of plastic. We received the spacer, the tire. I love the tire. That right there, the knobby Goodyear tires, the 6-ply, 6.00 by 15. Very impressive. And BM, CM, and GM or OM screws. So the first step we do is we install the rim on the tire, and this is a real easy thing to do. Put the tire down on the back side of the rim, and then we want to line up the 4 holes to the 4 tabs. As easy as possible here. And BM screws go into this. 4 of them. And last one. Make sure they're all tight. Lubricate these holes here, just like I lubricated the other ones with my Vaseline. And we'll line up the brake drum. CM screws go into that. Make sure everything's tight. And that's how that looks there. Now we're going to install this on the axle. Bring the axle over. I'm going to go ahead and lubricate the axle. I'll put the wheel on it. Just like that. And a washer goes in, the 25E part. Then we put our screw in. And with the washer in, it should be good. We'll tighten it down. And there you go. That looks good there. And then we'll press fit the cap on. Looks good. So I have the wheel and tire here from stage 4, and back then we put the hubcap on, which locked in our washer that we need. So there's the washer. Put the washer in and install the OM screw. Hubcap on, and there we go. And that completes stage 25. Let's look at stage 26, the final stage for Pack 7. Welcome back. Let's look at the build instructions for the final stage of Pack 7, and that's stage 26. This time we have a lot to do for 26. We're going to install all the brake hoses and connectors and the brake valve itself. We have a lot of steps involved here, but I'll try to make it as easy and simple for you as possible in this video. And basically going to wrap our brake hoses to our brake valve here, mount the brake valve, and we'll run our hoses to where they need to go. And then we're going to make the brake hose assembly for the rear end of the car, and then the brake hose assembly for the front end of the car, and we'll route those to the axles themselves. So it should be pretty easy. Let me get the parts and I'll be right back. Here's the parts for stage 26, and all the hoses are in here and the brake valve itself. So give me a second, I'll take these out, we'll get a closer look. And here's a close-up of the parts. We did receive the brake valve and brake frame assembly along with the connectors, and I'm going to pull these away so we will look at these a little closer at all these different connectors. And we received DM and CP screws. Now as far as the hoses go, we have 4 different sizes. We have a real long one, so that's the J hose. 26J, and then we have the second to longest hose. We have two of those. That's 26G, and then we have 26I, and then lastly the shortest hose is 26H. And here's a close-up of those connectors. So 26A are these connectors here. Now these are the end pieces for the hoses, and they'll connect right into the drum brakes. There's 4 of them, 2 up front, 2 in the back. And they tell you to remove this off the tree. I'm going to leave them on the tree until I get the hose hooked up to them. That way we don't lose them and we don't have any spares for those. Next we have 26B. Now 26B, only 2 hoses hook up to it, and the other tab that sticks out is actually a mounting tab to the frame. So B just has the 2, as you can see, and the mounting frame tab there. Next one is the larger connector, and that's 26F, and 3 hoses will hook up to that. And it also mounts to the frame itself, or I believe this mounts to the top of the differential. Yeah, so that mounts to the top of the differential on the rear end. So 3 hoses hook up to that, and it mounts to the top of the differential. And then lastly, we have 26E. 26E also has 3 hoses that hook up to it, and it mounts to the frame itself. And in this case, it doesn't mount to the frame, it mounts to the front axle, the top of the front axle. Okay? So the first steps that we're going to do here, just to keep it simple, is I'm going to go ahead and mount the brake valve to the brake valve bracket that mounts to the frame. And then we're going to hook up these 2 hoses here. The longer hose, the J, and the second to longest hose, which is the G hose. So I'm going to pull the hoses aside. We're going to put those on here in a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and mount the bracket to the brake valve. Now the bracket itself has a long side to it and a short side. So the short side is what mounts to the top of the bracket here, just like that. Now these are all plastic, so it should just go on really good. CP screw goes into that. So I'm going to run it through the bracket first, and then hold the bracket and get it started. And be careful you don't over tighten these to strip them out. Just snug it down until it's tight. That should be good. Next we go ahead and install our brake hoses. Now we're going to take the shorter one, the G, and we're going to mount that to the top. And that's just going to insert into that. And that looks good there. And then the J bracket or hose will go on the other side. And it may help to put it in your mouth, and with the saliva and the warmth will help the hose slide on. And there you go. Longer hose coming off the side here, and the shorter G hose coming off the top. Now let's get the other hoses ready to mount. I'm kind of skipping around in the steps there. I'm not going to follow it in order. So I'm going to go ahead and assemble the rear brake hose manifold, and we're going to be using the following parts. The 28F, which is the larger T-fitting that mounts to the top of the transfer case, and then 26B, which will be mounting to the frame, and that only 2 hoses hook up to that. And then the hoses themselves is the 26H and 26Is on both ends. And then we're going to put 2As, 26As on the outside, and that's these right here because these mount up to the brake drums. I'll be right back. Now we'll mount one of the drum connectors, drum brake connectors there, and I softened up the hose. And there you go. So I softened it in my mouth, and the saliva gives me just a little bit of lubrication. And now that it's mounted on there, I can cut it off so I don't lose it. And here's the rear brake line hose assemblies all put together, and looks good there. It's ready to go to be installed on the car. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and assemble the front brake line hose assembly. I'll be right back. And here's the front brake line manifold for the front brakes. But we have the hoses that are involved here is the G hose, which is the second to longest, and the H hose, which was the shortest hose, and in between those goes that connector, which is a E, the E connector, 26E, and then on the end of each of those hoses we put the 26A connectors for the brake drums. So I'll do that and I'll be right back. And here's the brake hose manifold for the front brakes, and of course the T-fitting here will mount on top of the axle, and this right here are your A fittings, and they go into the brake drums on each side. I'll be right back. So we'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and mount the brake valve, and that mounts just aft of the steering box, and I've already lubricated the holes here. I'm going to run the line underneath. There's actually a spot where the line can go into on the side of the frame. And DM screws can go into this. Put 2 DM screws into this. Make sure we tighten these screws down nice and tight here. And there we go. And then I'm going to flip this over because I need to run this longer line. And this longer line will run through the chassis here. Just like that. And you can see we have a spot here on the side of the chassis that this will insert into. I'll flip that over, and you can see where that runs to right there. Connect that hose to the manifold here. So I have that hose mounted now to it, and we need to just route that over and press that down in place. And move the hoses underneath the axle for now, and take my tweezers, turn it, and press it down. That's how that looks there. Flip that over. And take the other bracket, and that will go on top of the axle. Just right there. Press that down in place. And there you go. And then we take our hoses and we mount those to the drum. Just like that. Do the other side. And perfect. And you can see mounted to that drum on top of the axle, and then routes to under the frame. Looks good. Now we've got to do the back side. Now we take the front hose manifold and we hook it to the line coming off our brake valve. And that's this line right here. And that's going to go right on that T-fitting, just like that. So now we have that line hooked up to the T-fitting, and it's going to mount right there on top of the axle. Just kind of see it. So I'm going to run my lines under again. And you need to go underneath the steering arm. Pushed it down with my finger. That looks good there. And mount it to the drum brake. And there that is. Same on the other side. And there you go. And there you have it. Both lines are hooked up. We're mounted to the top of the axle and to both drums there. And there you have it. That completes pack 7. And I had a blast putting this together. It's really starting to look like a Jeep now. We did a lot here, installing the rear axle and springs and U-bolts and the brake lines. So I had a blast doing that. So if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell for all video upload notifications. Head over to eaglemoss.com and subscribe to this Jeep today. It's fantastic and it's readily available. Happy modeling, everybody, and take care.